Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. My name is Adel Mahroui. I am moderating this session about evolving trade towards regional cooperation, sustainability, and inclusivity. Just a quick notice, we have translation in the background. Some of our guests will be speaking in Arabic. The translation in Arabic is on channel 1, English on channel 2, and French on channel 3. We're meeting at this time, of course, and it's no longer a secret. Everyone knows the global events that are going on. We have two major events that are shaking the world's economy, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukrainian issue. While both have had quite a harsh toll on the economies, they've actually pushed the world into two different paths. The COVID-19 pandemic has encouraged international trade, where countries have been trying to support one another through sending on medical supplies, vaccines, and sometimes when ports are shut down, they would send basic goods. But the Russian-Ukrainian issue, on the other hand, as it affects and is putting the world on the verge of a food crisis, it has revived the notion of self-sustainability, or at least regional sustainability, so that countries no longer need to rely heavily on importing from far beyond. And the concept of cost-effective goods no longer have the value as having a sustainable flow of goods in general. To talk and discuss more about these topics, we have with us Engineer Hani Sumbul, Chief Executive Officer of the International Islamic Finance Corporation, ITFC, Professor Benedict Urama, President of the Africa Export-Import Bank, Mr. Hussein Amr Muhammad Rashad, Chief Executive Officer of the State Trading Organization in Maldives, Engineer Mohammed Swedi, Chairman of the Federation of Egyptian Industries, and Mr. Muhammad Qasim, Chairman of Expo. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Engineer Sumbul, I will start with you. And basically, ITFC is organizing this event. The session attempts to discuss the interlinkages between trade and sustainable development in OIC member countries in the current context, and to identify manageable pathways to global sustainability through the complex web of cause and effect. Why does ITFC want to specifically put the spotlight on this issue?
Thank you very much. ITFC is actually very much concerned, as being a development institution looking at I would say, objective, which is enhancing really the economic and social, well-being of people. So definitely, all the 17 SDGs are quite relevant to ITFC work. And as of today, I think ITFC is directly involved in almost 8 of the 17 SDGs. And in each one of these SDGs, we do have, of course, transactions, programs that are very much related directly to the 8. The other ones, we have, of course, indirectly, we contribute to the rest of them. But I am sure, as I said, being a very involved MDB like ITFC, also tackling a very important sector, which is definitely the trade sector, and we are very much concerned about any development process that any member country undertakes. So definitely our role in terms of financing, or in terms of really providing support to member countries through our programs and through also the major initiatives that is led by ITFC with the strategic partners. So this is very important. And what makes actually this is very relevant to us is that we do want really member countries to achieve the SDGs, and we closely monitor the progress, and we also know that all the crisis that is now, all member countries being affected by the reoccurrence of crisis, one after another. I mentioned some of them yesterday. Since 2008, we've had 2010, the commodity prices, and also the financial crisis in 2014. Then we've had 2020 was, of course, the big pandemic. Now we see geopolitical also crises are. So all of this really, what worries any multi-development institutions, and some of them, of course, are with us here today, is that we do not want to lose what we have been achieving over the years, really, toward achieving the target of the SDGs 2030. In addition to that, of course, if we take also the other side, looking at the importance of trade actually as being an engine of growth, we look at one of the major issues and constraints is access to financing by the public and private sector, and especially the private sector, as we have been seeing nowadays how really this sector is going to be, or the role of this sector is going to be so relevant in the future. We must really also be able to keep really supporting. One of our really other concerns is that, the ability of countries to be more resilient, to really come across future also crises and pandemics, la samahallah. But this is our role, is that we need to keep going, as I said in my first session. So we also very much concerned about those, I would say, the sectors that can make a difference, like the SMEs. Most of the countries, they do have, the high percentage of SMEs being the maybe 80 to 85% of the economic tissues, and they need support. And mostly they need, to export their products, and they need financing. That's why we are very much concerned to develop the products that is more relevant and more suitable for member countries. So with all of this, I think the role of trade in achieving also the SDGs is very, very relevant, and I think with what we see again in the world, I think trade is becoming maybe number one issue, because it is related to all what we see today in terms of food insecurity, and we see the disruption in the supply chains and inflation, and all of what we see today has a direct relation to what we do actually. Thank you.
As you've mentioned, Engineer Sunbul, resilience is important, and having a financial mechanism in general is quite important. Professor Benedict Orama, over the years, the Afrexim Bank has grown from being a short-term trade financier of Africa to expanding its instruments like in financing projects in longer-term manufacturing and project finance sectors. In light of evolving trade towards regional cooperation, why is it important to expand the scope of trade finance?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Let me begin by extending our appreciation and also congratulations to the ISDB group for putting a fantastic show, for a very interesting annual meeting that has provided a platform for vibrant exchange of views on topical issues. We are also proud to be strong partners of the Islamic Development Bank Group, and look forward to continue to work with them as we pursue our shared ambition of supporting the development of Africa and promoting trade between the Arab world and Africa. Now to your question, traditionally, conventionally, export credit agencies exist where countries export capital goods. So, because if you say you want to finance export of capital, you have to have the credit to support it. Where a country exports consumption goods, there's no need for export credit. For example, if you are exporting cocoa, cocoa is paid for on the cash against documents. So as soon as you ship it, give somebody a shipping document, they pay you. So there's no credit. Whereas if you're exporting machine, you ship it, the person needs a few years to pay, then there's a need for export credit. So you would then ask me why an Exim Bank in a developing country should exist. Why should it operate? So why an Exim Bank like a Exim Bank was created was to change the structure of the economy and of the exports. So for us, when we started, of course, as a new institution, we had to deal with immediate challenges. Immediate challenge of providing pre-export finance for commodities. But that was not the main reason Exim Bank was created, because commercial banks can give pre-export finance for cocoa, for coffee, for all those things. We were created to change the structure of exports. That means we had to facilitate the import of investment goods. We have to support the export of investment goods. So when we got to a certain stage, we had to begin that transformation, otherwise we become irrelevant. And that transformation then meant that we had to begin to finance import of export generating goods, equipment, raw materials that are used to produce for export. And the second thing we also started to do, of course, to promote intra-regional trade. And within the context of intra-regional trade, you have a rising demand for infrastructure goods. Annually, Africa spends about $60 billion on infrastructure. But unless you have a bank that can finance other African EPC contractors to participate, this $60 billion of market will go to others. It will not grow the continent. So we also began to support, in the context of intra-African trade, the export of infrastructure. We are very proud that we have done so well with it. And this Egypt, in the past few years, I think we've done more than $5 billion of it. We did the largest intra-African EPC contract in Tanzania between two Egyptian companies, Eswidi, Orascom, and the Tanzanian government, and that was for $2.9 billion. We financed it completely from Africa. Exim Bank coordinating, we had Egyptian banks, we had Tanzanian banks. We put all the money, $2.9 billion, and the dam that will give them 2 giga of electricity is underway. We also have done quite a number of other projects, roads, power, and other projects all across Africa within that context. So that's why I'm beginning to see that transformation from the normal just financing commodities and then going to investment goods and project finance. That does not mean we are not still financing commodities. Yes, we are. There's a lot of demand, not only on the export side, but on the critical imports for fuels, for pharmaceuticals, for food. We are still doing this in a big way. But that transformation we are seeing will continue so that we can make the bank to play its rightful role in transforming the structure of the African economy in a positive way.
And the Exim Bank has actually done quite a remarkable job in that regard during the past years. Moving beyond the African continent, the Maldives is quite an example when it comes to environmental sustainability and climate change, because these are topics that have been quite overshadowed with the recent events, global events, of course. But in general, it also has become quite important to preserve these sustainable environmental treasures, if I may say, to make proper economic growth and development. The small size and the low-lying nature of the Maldivian islands make the nation system highly exposed and sensitive and vulnerable to climate change impacts, which poses risk, of course, on key industries. But Mr. Amr, what opportunities does the Maldives see in these vulnerabilities?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank ITFC for the long-standing relationship and the commitment. Yesterday, we increased our facility to $175 million, which will be used for energy security, food security, and medical security. So I would like to really thank Han. Yes, Adil, you are right. We have 1,200 islands, and all these islands are below 1 meter above the sea level. And our economy is mainly based on tourism and fisheries. And both these sectors are vulnerable to extreme weather conditions, sea level rise, and rise in temperatures. For example, our beaches will be eroded because of the sea level rise, and this will have a devastating effect on our tourism and our economy and our livelihood. And also we are facing coral bleaching, which due to rise in temperatures, and this is damaging our fisheries and our whole marine ecosystem. So in short, because of climate change is actually threatening our livelihood, our 2,000-year-old civilization. But we are a very resilient bunch of people. We survived in the middle of nowhere for thousands of years. We are actually doing a lot of things to mitigate, to adapt to the effects of climate change. For example, our resorts are initiating greener projects, and in fact some of the resorts are run completely on renewable energy now. And we are trying to create awareness in different forms and in different forums. We even had a cabinet session underwater. So this has created a lot of awareness on the subject of sustainability and also about Maldives. A lot of people now know Maldives. That's a very good thing for us. More and more people are visiting Maldives every year, and this has created a growth in our economy as well. The second thing, Adil, I would like to highlight is since Maldives is one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to climate change, this is the most ideal place to conduct case studies and researches. But unfortunately, our education system is not that advanced. I think there's an opportunity for international research institutions and universities to conduct surveys and do the research. The breakthrough research, the affordable technology that we really need to do things that we are doing, to change actually the things that we are doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maldives, speaking about tourism, you've just recently had your record single-day visitors by tourists, the highest ever, just right in the middle of what's going on in the world and beyond your focus on the usual nationalities that visit Maldives the most. Engineer Sweeney, basically Egypt is predominantly composed of micro and small enterprises, and SMEs in general are the backbone of any economy. Yet they have been quite struggling because of the recent events. How are you working to create sustainable resilience so that they can sustain and manage to have healthy ecosystems to pass through this stage?
Well, thank you very much. That's a really good comment. We at the Federation, that's the first year for us that we changed the law of the Federation itself, and to bring the small and medium companies to be a part by law in all the chambers. So we divided the election into 3 parts: part for big companies. I mean, the chamber now is contained of 1/3 big companies, 1/3 medium companies, and 1/3 small companies. So now they're part of the decisions. They know all what's going on, and to know all the time how to make them part of our economy. That's a very important role now. Plus, there is a new law that has just been finished, especially for the small and medium. The tax law, special tax law for them, that makes a certain percentage. They don't have to struggle and to go into all the revisions that comes from the books, and also they make their life easily to make them part and to give them more chance to concentrate into the business more than just making it difficult in managerial way. Also, the law that we're having now, the law number 5, which is the privilege for the local content in all tenders. To be able to have a product and to contain 40%, it means that you have to lose local components. And your local components, so the medium and small companies must be part of your local content to be able to complete your 40% as a part. So that's a very important part. Also, you're now having special industrial zones. They just go and rent their factory, the small factory, and they just go ahead and start. So, I mean, because we believe that they are main, or they're the backbone of the economy, they have to be all the time having special interest rates, having special in dealing with all the laws to attract more small and medium companies into our economy, because actually at the end they are even when you suffer from the word, they keep going more than the big companies, and that's a very, even they had a very big role in the pandemic that happens during the COVID and all that. So we're giving them all the best that we can, especially in this period of time, because even they hire more labor. So that's why we're always giving them more push to that thing.
Flexibility, I think, is what we all learned during the past time for corporations, SMEs, to be more, to be resilient. They need to be flexible to deal with these fast interchangeable events. Mr. Qasim, Intra-African trade is the center point of the African Continent Free Trade Area Agreement. Egypt was among the first countries to sign and ratify the AFCFTA in 2019, and was also one of the first countries to present its tariff schedules in both trade and services, showing initiative, of course, to integrate and enhance trade between countries across the continent. In your opinion, what are the two enablers that will help African companies reap these benefits?
Well, thank you, Adil, and I thank the Islamic Bank and the ITSFS to that invited us to be here with this distinguished panel. And before giving you my opinion about the two enablers, let me go back a little bit to your introductory remarks, because it's relevant to the continental free trade area. In your remarks, you talked about the pandemic and the Ukrainian war, and I think I will comment on the pandemic first, because it called into question the global supply chain, the way it is right now. And people, instead of going global, offshoring, now are going back to either reshoring or nearshoring. So that process created a very important incentive for investors worldwide to come to places like Africa, because they cannot, people started to think that I cannot depend on so far away production centers. So they have to come closer to their markets. Africa is situated at, you know, very close to Europe, very close proximity to Europe, and also much closer to America than Asia. So that creates a huge opportunity. So how can Africa benefit of this? Obviously, the Continental Free Trade Area provides a very, very important tool to do that. However, we still need to work on a few enablers, as you said, coming to your question. The first enabler actually is connectivity. Africa is not connected. We are one continent, but we are not connected with each other. If I am traveling from Cairo, want to go to a country and another capital in Africa or another city in Africa, most probably I will have to go to Europe before going to Africa, or I have to go to Dubai before going to Africa. So connectivity through airport, through aviation, through seaports is very, very important to make a unified market. Without this action of movement for people and for capital, it's very difficult to create markets. So the first enabler will be connectivity. The second one would be, in my opinion, cross-border trade. We have many landlocked countries inside the continent. They don't have ports. So how could they trade with the rest of the world? So border trade is very, very important in this case. And let me give you an example. Between Egypt and Sudan, many people don't know that we bring the camels from Sudan to Egypt. They walk through the desert until they come to the Egyptian borders, ride a train, come to the area close to Cairo to be sold or for whatever reason. And the people coming through these borders, they don't have passes, they don't have permissions, they don't have anything. They just bring camels, sell it in the Egyptian market with Egyptian money. With this Egyptian money, buy goods from Egypt and take it back to Sudan. So cross-border, Egypt is one example, Egypt and Sudan is one example. But you take any country that's landlocked, and you will find that trade borders very, very important. So those are the two enablers that I think we should put emphasis on. Obviously, Egypt has been a pioneer to support this continental FTA. And I'm personally, because I wear another African hat, which is the African Cotton and Textile Federation, so it is very important to us and dear to our hearts.
Thank you, Sharon. When it comes, of course, one of the aspects that you've mentioned in terms of agriculture in general is the need to preserve the environmental impact so that such precious white gold, as we call it here in Egypt, can sustain longer. If any of you would like to ask a question, our ushers, they will have a piece of paper that you can write your questions on and then send them back to the stage. Engineer Hani, ITFC in general have been quite active. You have been quite active in the trade finance space over the years by approving more than $65 billion since 2008. Why is trade finance so important compared to the other types of financing when it comes to sustainable development?
Thank you. Why trade finance is important? It is really very important, actually. But before we talk about why it is important, I think it is not the only important. Financing, I repeat again, is not the only important. Many other things are important, but also the capacities to absorb this financing and to really have the ability to implement projects, transactions, managing all the trade in member countries requires a lot of capacity building. So in my view, trade finance and the other important programs and technical assistance is quite important. That's what really constitute what we call the ITFC business model. This is how we operate. In the past, we used to focus a lot on only trade finance. But also, as we know, and I repeat again, trade finance is actually and trade development are actually directly connected and linked, and it is considered the engine of growth for any development process. You cannot do development. You cannot just build factories and produce without really exporting and importing raw material goods, and then when it is manufactured, you export it. All the line here requires a different type of trade finance. And definitely without this trade finance, you will not be able to really have a development process. And of course, other types of financing is also very important, because it fits also the different development needs. Today, if you talk about the long-term financing, using modes of financing like istisna, like installment sale, like leasing, whatever, you require really to go for a longer period of time, but it is more suitable for certain type of projects. Trade finance requires really more rapid and more fast dealing. And also, I think we can see that as recent reports also by the World Bank, we've seen that 80% of the global trading system is actually heavily dependent on trade finance, really for the other thing is that we create development also through trade finance. Today, as I mentioned in my previous intervention, trade finance is linked to all of these SDGs. Before that, also it is linked to all the what we call the Millennium Development Goals and so on. Without trade finance, you will not be actually able to provide. We spoke about the challenges that is facing all sectors, private sector and public sectors, and we find always at the top of the list is the needs to access financing. And definitely the financing we talk about is the financing needed for the member countries to be able to procure their needs, needed by the private sector to have their raw materials, and also later on provide an import trade finance also for exporting and so on. If we take ITFC, we have been, since 2008, we have really been able to, we were successful to allocate $65 billion US, and also, that's quite an achievement in a very short period of time. But we felt that demand is needed, and we need to be ready to support member countries.
The Afrexim Bank has also been working in line.
Let me just finish this part, please, if you don't mind. The point is I'm trying to reach is that to show you how in 1 year, like in 2021, people are coming out of the COVID-19, and then with all these problems, we were able actually to allocate almost like 6.7 billion US in a year. 39 million people were benefited from this. We know that the demand was increased due to the crisis as well. And of course, 120,000 jobs were created in that year through our interventions. And we have also created 250 million of income to farmers. All of this, of course, is done through trade finance. And finally, also pre-export financing brought almost 430 million US of export revenues to the African LDMCs. And that's what I said, trade finance is so important. We have a report, it's called the Effectiveness Development Report, and it has more details to show you how important is this trade finance, and you can access that through our website, ITFC website.
Thank you, sir. Professor Rama, through the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, the African Bank is providing a unique financial structure, including purchase guarantee to vaccine manufacturers and payment facilitation plans as well. That's, of course, for African states. Is there a similar mechanism possible for African countries to face agriculture product shortages resulting, of course, from the challenges that we're seeing globally?
Yeah, thank you very much. And regarding the interventions during the pandemic, I must thank our brother, Engineer Sombo, and Dr. Tal Badia, who joined us to make sure we provided the support that African economies needed so badly at the height of the pandemic. I think that's what we call true partnership. And the intervention we did that at that time was born out of necessity. Apart from the $8 billion we disbursed to enable countries procure personal protective equipment, face masks, test kits, therapeutics, and so on. What was not so much reported were the kinds of interventions that went under them. And one of them was the digital platform we created in partnership with the AU Envoy for Procurement, Mr. Masiwa, Africa CDC, and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, called the Africa Medical Supplies Platform. We used that platform to pool the demand of all African countries. That then enabled us to have a bargaining power at a time. It was difficult to buy face masks, as you know. There was so much competition, and China was the only supplier that you couldn't stand in front of a manufacturer if you were not talking in hundreds of millions of dollars. And you had 55 fragmented African countries. I think our brother Kassim mentioned it. Splintered. Many of them would not have had the opportunity to buy anything, even if they had the money, just because the population was small. So we used the platform to place those orders. And then when the vaccine issue came, it became obvious to us very quickly that unless we did something for ourselves as a continent, we were going to suffer very, very badly. So the African Union, the heads of state, asked us through the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team to find a solution, and we provided the $2 billion for the procurement of vaccines. Again, that was the headline. But behind it, what made it successful again was the Africa Medical Supplies Platform, which we used to pool demand and which made it possible for us to negotiate vaccine contracts. Without it, we couldn't, because vaccine manufacturers were not talking to anybody, as you knew. So it is that experience that we've taken now to the Ukraine crisis. I'm sure you may have seen in the news that the chairperson of the African Union, President Macky Sall, announced the launch of the Africa Trade Exchange, which is a repurposed digital platform which we are using to pool demand for grains, for vegetable oil, for fertilizers. And we are using this to present one pooled demand and to enable us to negotiate food prices better, fertilizer prices better. And in fact, as discussions are going on with the United Nations, with Russia, and so on, that platform is becoming important as an instrument to make sure that we are able to distribute fairly, transparently, whatever is negotiated, and that we are able to then pay for them. So that is what we are doing. And we have also, in the context, put up a facility of $4 billion called Ukraine Crisis Adjustment Trade Finance Program for Africa. it is this facility that will support procurement under the platform. We hope that with that, we will be able to reduce the cost of procurement for grains, reduce the cost of shipping, because today the shipping costs are very high because of insurance, because of unavailability. But we believe that given the negotiations we are having on a platform, a single platform, that we are going to be able to get these services, these facilities cheaper, and be able to use them to support the continent, and then make it easier for us to provide the financing, make it easier for the countries to be able to also pay for those. And again, we must thank ITFC and other ISDB group entities for their partnership in what I've just described. And we hope that going forward, we will find as a people, as a continent, a way of institutionalizing these arrangements, because we are going to see more and more crises in the future, given the way the world is going.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Amr, how is SDO involved in the formulation of the policy and operation response to tackle climate change responses? As you said, it is essential and Maldives is quite affected, but how is this coordination going?
State Trading Organization is the largest entity in the Maldives. We, apart from many industries that we involved, we provide security, fuel security, food security, and medical security to the entire country. For example, what we do is we try to balance it and take initiatives and responsibility in the fields that we are operating. For example, we bring fuel to power all the islands. Each island has its own power generation which uses diesel. And diesel has many elements. One of the elements is sulfur. And sulfur is not only damaging to the environment but also our health as well. It affects our respiratory system and it causes cancer as well. So we used to bring high sulfur fuel, which is of course cheaper, but we have come down from 2.5% sulfur content to 0.01% sulfur content. It is expensive, but we have actually done that. And we also have established a fuel laboratory to ensure that no dirty fuel ends up in the Maldives. The other thing is, in order to encourage firms to actually proactively start greener initiatives or do things much greener and much cleaner, it is important to measure and report on sustainability. We at STO take sustainability reporting like religion. It actually creates awareness, and also, most importantly, it actually continuously reminds us to not to lose focus on the issues of climate change.
If the coordination is ongoing, the impact itself, how is it essential? Because some believe that if we talk about the environmental sustainability in general, that might limit a country from having proper or desired economic growth. So in your case, does these environmental goals that the Maldives aims to affect the economic ambitions?
The question is quite tricky to answer in a short time. When we talk about economic development and environmental goals, we can't prioritize one and leave the other, at least in the short term. For example, in Maldives, our GDP has grown from $500 million to $6 billion in just 15 years. And our per capita has grown from $2,000 to $10,000 in that period. So this has created a lot of demand for the governments to take infrastructure projects such as roads, harbors, bridges, schools, hospitals, and even airports. So all our limited funds are allocated to these economic development, infrastructure development projects. But the government has introduced a green tax. All the tourists that visit Maldives pays a green tax, and this green fund is actually allocated wholly for environmental projects and green initiatives. And our government has now set a target to go zero carbon emission. Yes, thank you. To actually go net zero by 2030. That means that we will not undertake any projects which will increase our carbon emission. Instead, we will use greener initiatives, greener projects to come up to a level that is balancing. In financial terms, we call it a break-even. And also, just one more thing that the government has gone very aggressive on is single-use plastic. We have banned completely PET bottles and even plastic cotton buds. And by 2024, most of the single-use plastics will be banned. So hopefully by another couple of years, we can say Maldives is the cleanest country in the world.
That's very ambitious. Thank you, sir. Engineer Mohammed Swedi, we've seen how the world is changing rapidly. The growth of technology and new industries are emerging. Yet in developing countries, which is almost all of the OIC and Africa, they're lagging to catch up with these new areas. What can we do to keep up with such industries and guarantee a piece of these new pies? Some of them are very advanced technologies, others are environment related. So what do you suggest, or how are you moving towards them?
Well, actually, all these changes, it takes some time, but there is a start for everything. And we have started a lot first by upgrading and getting technology into all the factories, and especially the SMEs and all that, to catch up by the world, how it's going on, also to catch up by the supply chain, how to make a good supply chain for all factories. So without having this technology and to see what's going on in the world and what are actually producing in the world here, this is very different. And that's actually what we're doing. Second thing is that we are upgrading some technical schools, and we're making a very good project with the government, how to transfer the schools into more or less technically upgraded schools, to get graduates that can cope with the new technologies, and by either it's machines or either it's communication or it's software development and all that, because the world has changed the last 10 years dramatically. I mean, by all what we've seen, even in Egypt here, we have lots of changes the last 10 years. So you always have to make good corrections and good actions by every problem that you have. I mean, you have to transfer it into positive action, not into negative action. And actually that's what we're doing with the government. We're doing it inside the federation, with our tech companies from all over the world. I mean, so it's moving, it's getting into action, and that's part of our role, how to catch up with the new technologies, giving them the chances. If we can do something as a federation by upgrading a part of that, we do it immediately, and we grab it from here.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll turn to you, Mr. Qasim. Last week, the South African foreign minister was here in Egypt. She was talking with Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri, and she was talking about how Africa has mostly a huge area of agriculture, arable land that is useful for agriculture, yet it is not used. So this is bringing back the focus on the concept in general. What should we be focusing on as both regions in the OIC and Africa? Should we expand and infiltrate new fields, or focus and nurture the fields that we are already good at or have the natural resources for?
Well, thank you, Adil, for this very important question. I think Africa is not really achieving its potential. And I think the lack of development and the poverty that we are suffering in Africa and the hunger sometimes in many areas are an aftershock for the colonial era. But this is not the subject for the discussion. What do Africans do? I think they have to do both. They have to do what their resources allows them to do, and they will have to import new technologies and new methods and new ways of development that could be proven effective in other parts of the world. In my opinion, I think it goes back also to governance. I have a story in my mind. In the 70s, late 70s, Arab countries put together an organization and with a headquarter in Sudan with 500 million Kuwaiti dinar, which at that time was a humongous amount of money, to develop agrarian land and make sure that Africa and the Arab world can find food. There was nothing came out of this 500 million Kuwaiti dinar. Where did it go? I'm not sure. All what was left was a starch factory and another factory, another chicken farm. So nothing else was. The money was put in deposits in international banks to make profit or make some money on it. So I think it goes down to the regimes that has proper governance and make sure that the resources are used properly to produce what their people want.
Thank you very much, sir. We're going to have just quick questions from the audience. We have one question that was asking about the cross-border trade is difficult due to connectivity, as we were talking about, risk, economy of scale and capacity. How do we overcome those difficulties, and how can this be of support to larger private groups or governments? Would you like to continue, Professor Ram? Sorry? I'm sorry, yeah, okay. Sorry, airplanes. So basically, it's talking about cross-border trade, and it's usually difficult because of the challenges to connectivity, risk economy, and economy of scale and capacity. So the question is asking, how do we overcome those difficulties, and how can this be supported by large private groups and governments? Professor Rahman, would you like to take that?
No, thank you very much. The problem of Africa is the fragmentation into atomistic countries that are not connected, such that somebody in one country knows more about what is happening in Europe or Asia than he knows about what is happening across the other. So you start with information. I think that is the critical thing. It looks so simple, but it's powerful. Because when people have information, investments can flow. If you don't have information, you can build whatever you want to build, nothing will happen. But with regard to what we are doing to change it, because we believe that that is what we have to overcome. It is digital that we are trying to use. We believe that it's digital that will help us vote the borders we have. And that is why we have what we call the Africa Trade Gateway that we are developing. which we have the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System that makes it possible for trade to be paid for in African currencies. Kasim mentioned about people in Sudan carrying goods in camels and then use Egyptian pounds to transact. This time, they don't need to do that. They will just pay. And this has been launched. It has been piloted in the West African Monetary Zone and is commercialized now. I think we've signed an MOU with Buna for the payment system for the Arab world to integrate them. We have also, under the auspices of the African Union, launched the Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme. Today, if you want to move goods from Cairo to Cape Town, each border you have to stop, you have to put up transit bond, delays, costly and all that. So under the Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme, we issue one regional bond in collaboration with the national issuers so that the truck actually leaves Cairo non-stop. It won't stop to deal with issue of transit guarantee or transit bond until it gets to Johannesburg. That removes another big obstacle to the trade. And we are doing trade information. And we're working with quite a number of companies in Egypt and other parts of Africa. Because trade information is critical. And that we have the trade intelligence solutions that is using artificial intelligence to predict supply chains. Now, finally, you see, the need for infrastructure to connect the continent is huge. You need about $130 billion per year to do that. The total budget of all African countries on an annual basis is less than $300 billion per year. So even if you put all the budget of African countries, you can only do less than maybe 50% of it. It means you need private capital. For private capital to go in, you have to show it's bankable. For it to be bankable, private people have to have information. That's why information is important.
Thank you very much, sir. Engineer Hani Zumbul, please final remarks, bullet points.
All actually what Professor Rama said is actually the right solutions, and I just would like to add two things to it. First of all, now the African continent have this new free trade agreement, the CFTA. I think if this was implemented well, it will include all these programs that will lead to more integration and more actually cooperations between the African continent. And I think one of the main challenges that is of course cross-borders trade. This agreement it is more comprehensive. It is maybe one of the largest agreement since the establishment of the WTO, and it really tackles this issue regarding the cross-border goods and labor. The second one is actually the program, the Arab-Africa Trade Bridge Program. This program is a solution to this kind of challenges, because it has so many programs to facilitate actually trade between member countries.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's a lot of opportunities that we're coming across, a lot of potential, and also a lot of challenges to overcome for both our regions. It's been a pleasure talking to you and to you, everyone. A pleasure until we meet next time. Thank you.
Thank you to our dear panelists, and please, I would like to ask our dear attendees to remain seated, as we will be beginning our next session immediately. This high-level panel discussion will be tackling how credit and political risk insurance can help facilitate climate action. This will be our next session, so I kindly remind you to